All right, I'm going to talk about the ALMA subject areas. The subject areas are the broadest level of data groupings, and they sort of form the foundation of your reports that you're going to be building. There are different subject areas for different types of data within ALMA, which I'll show you. Normally what you would do is if you're creating a subject area, if you're creating an analysis from scratch, you would first determine what type of analysis you were wanted to create, and then you would choose the one appropriate subject area to build your analysis off of. It is possible in more advanced analytics to combine subject areas. I think we'll be talking about that probably in the next session when we talk about advanced analytics. For now, just be aware that they can be combined, and you'll be seeing that later. There are currently 24 different subject areas available. This link, it's well documented in the ALMA documentation. If you clicked on this, you'd see links to detailed descriptions of each of these. After this slide, I'm going to go through each one of these very briefly and give you just an idea of what type of information you can get from them. One thing to be aware of is that this is not necessarily a static list. There used to be fewer subject areas, and Ex Libris does add to these over time. I think like 4 or 5 were added earlier this year. And they do listen to customer feedback about what types of reports people are wanting to make, and they do adjust the options here from time to time. So I'm assuming this list would continue to grow. Few things when I go through these, I am going to skip over digital inventory and the Leganto, these 3 Leganto subject areas, because as Kim mentioned, we aren't using those components of ALMA at this time. So it's important to know what they are. On these next slides, I just list them, and I won't go through every single detail, but if you want to later, you can see some of the example types of queries you could run based on these. The first one, analytics usage tracking. I'm projecting that this wouldn't be used extremely often by average staff members. It's for looking at analytics about analytics itself. So if an administrator was curious about what types of reports were being run or who was running them, that's why they might use that subject area. Benchmark is intended to allow you to compare some of your business processes to other similar institutions. So after you configure your system to allow you to do that, you could compare efficiencies, I could say, for lack of a better word, between your library and another library. For example, how much time it takes between item receipt and shelving. And there's a lot of those kind of metrics in there, time between one step and another. And that's what that subject area is designed for, to let you see how you're doing compared to other institutions. Borrowing requests has a partner subject area lower down called lending requests, and those both have to do with interlibrary loan requesting, borrowing or lending. Cost usage is a combination of countered electronic resource data and acquisitions data. So that's intended to let you evaluate the cost per use types of statistics. It does require that you have previously loaded counter data. Course reserves is self-explanatory. That's course reserve. Electronic inventory subject area is available to run stats on your e-resources, anything with a portfolio. An event is another one of these, probably more for administrators. Alma records an event whenever there's been a change to the database. So that subject area would tell you things like when was a bibliographic record edited or deleted, or what staff member has made what changes to what records over what period of time, that type of thing. Fines and fees deals with patron fines and fees. Fulfillment is where you would do most of your circulation type reports. Fund expenditures would deal with acquisitions, transactions. Lending requests, as I mentioned, is a counterpart to the borrowing requests subject area. Licenses is available for reporting on electronic resource licenses. The link resolver usage subject area has to do with activity within the view it box of Primo. So it will give you statistics on things like how many times a certain resource was attempted to, how many times a patron attempted to access a specific resource, or it will even tell you things like success versus failure in trying to retrieve a full text. Was the article delivered or not? Those types of things are in link resolver usage. Physical item subject area is where you would report out information about your print inventory. Different than physical items, historical events. An event is a physical item. Historical event is a record of a process change for a physical item. For example, when it went into a work order and out of the work order, when it went in or out of a temporary location, that type of thing. Requests has to do with material requested. Titles is sort of a broader level than the electronic inventory or the physical item subject areas. It deals with bibliographic records, things that happened at the bib level. Usage data, similar to the cost usage up above, except it does not have the acquisitions information. So this would be a good place if you just wanted to see like the JR1 data for a certain journal or platform without any financials attached to it. And the last one is users, which is obviously about the user database and patron records and things like that. So there's a lot of them, but it does give you a lot of options and a lot of flexibility. So now I'm going to talk about what's within the subject areas, a little bit of the mechanics. When you open a subject area after you've selected it, and we'll show you this when we go to creating reports, you get this very large tree, or it's more like an array of folders. And Ex Libris uses some specific terminology to refer to the components of these, which I think it's valuable to know what these things are called, especially when you're reading documentation or on the listserv or something like that. So, like I said, the highest level is the subject area, in this case, fines and fees. And then under that, this here is an expanded folder with some other unexpanded folders below it. The topmost folder, or two, it's usually the first one, is what they call a fact. And the ones below the fact are referred to as dimensions. The difference between a fact and a dimension is that the fact is the folder that contains measurements okay, which are these yellow ruler icon things. And these provide pre-calculated totals, numbers, counts of things. I'll give you an example a few slides down. As opposed to these icons, which are like a lined piece of paper, which are called descriptive fields. And I'll get to, more into detail of what the difference is between them. So it's subject area, facts, dimensions, and the components of those are measurements and descriptive fields. Subject area is this blue box icon. It's the broadest level. Both facts and dimensions have those folders there. They look the same, but when you expand them, you'll only see the measurements in the facts. Okay. Dimensions also have the yellow folders. There are they're not exclusive to the subject area, so you'll find some dimensions that are shared between different subject areas. Don't be confused by that. And I'm just pointing out there is something called a hierarchy, which is this funny little staggered blue box icon, which we talked about yesterday. No one knows how to use that yet, but it's in there. It's not very common. Mostly you'll see these things, and these things. Okay, next two slides are just a demonstration of the difference between a descriptive field and a measurement. Generally speaking, for any ALMA display element, like right here we're looking at a PO line screen, you'll find a corresponding descriptive field within analytics. So for example, we have like here, reporting code is a display label, and there's a comparable reporting code descriptive field, which is what you would expect to find if you're trying to look for a way to report out that type of data. Very occasionally, the names don't jive with each other, so I was trying to find this one before. Normally I would call this the PO line number, and it took me a while to figure out that ALMA Analytics calls it PO line reference, which isn't a huge deal. You can, you eventually figure it out, but it's frustrating sometimes. For the most part, what you're used to calling it is what it's called in here. But just be aware that the naming could be a bit different. This will show you what a measurement does. So again, the measurements are going to be in the top folder, and they have these ruler-looking icons. And basically what they are is the ALMA Analytics assumes you're going to be looking for these counts and prepares them in advance, in a sense, for you, so that all you need to do is drag this element into your analysis, and it will perform the calculation simply and easily, without doing any kind of fancy coding or complicated way to get to it. So in this case, this is a report of in-house loan counts for a particular set of items. These three columns on the right are descriptive fields. We have barcode, item ID, and location code. And this one column includes measures, which provides you sort of a ready-made count of the type of data that it is measuring. And this will be even more clear, I hope, later on when we start building some reports, how to use these different types of elements. So that's all I was prepared to show for this section.